Hello. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. I'm so excited.
Hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. Welcome to the Jared cast, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all the other folks of all the other types. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hi, hi, hi. Today we're talking about Studio Ghibli. That's probably why you're here. And yeah, I'm very excited to talk about it with Pauline, a fellow super fan of this filmmaker's work, Hayao Miyazaki. How you doing today, Pauline?
I'm good. I'm so excited to talk about these two movies with you. I feel like you and I have shared a love for these two movies specifically for such a long time. So to have a set time to just really dig into them, I think is going to be a lot of fun.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Well, actually, I saw Howl's recently. I think that's the one that you were like really pushing me to see, right? And then because that was like your favorite one when you were a kid or something like that. And then I
Spirit
had
Away was my favorite when I
okay,
was a
okay,
kid.
but I
I did
hadn't
not know
seen.
that you hadn't seen that one.
Yeah, I remember I told you I was like, oh, I finally saw it, and you were like, oh
Oh,
yeah, you finally saw it.
yay.
Yeah, it was that one, and then one other one that you were really pushing me to see, but I forgot what it was. But anyway, yeah, we've seen both more than once now, and way more than once. And yeah, I'm very excited to get into it because they've been yeah. You even I forget if it was a Christmas or a birthday, but you gave me like a mirror ornament thing of the bird in Spirited Away when the
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. I did get you that for Christmas one year.
yeah, he got very sun bleached, so I don't so he's somewhere in one of the boxes somewhere, but yeah, he's still around. He's still around. But yeah, yeah, that yeah. So, in case you didn't read the title of the video, we're talking about Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. We're gonna do a review of both, but before that, we got a very interesting top five. We're doing top five inanimate objects in animation. I kind of made a mistake. I forgot to exclude inanimate objects that came to life, which are technically animated objects that are I don't know how the science of magic works. So my list is going to be a little bit weird, but that's okay. I think that's fine. Um, why don't you start us off with your number five, though, for sure, for
All
start.
right. Yeah, I think this is such an interesting top five. It's so specific, but also covers such a huge range of things. And kind of excited that we interpreted the question differently. So let's get
Yes.
into it. All right, so my number five inanimate animated object is the potion bottle from Emperor's New Groove,
Yes.
which I love it so much because it's such an effective gag and reveal. And it's also the paper, the unfolding of it is complicated enough that I can't quite visualize how it fits together. So it is a surprise every time when it goes from skull to llama because I can't quite remember exactly which parts of the skull make the llama. And so
Right.
it makes me laugh every time. It's such an iconic thing from that movie, and I think it does such a great job of just setting the tone of the movie. Like if you just saw that one scene, you know exactly you know exactly what this movie's about and the shenanigans that's about to ensue. And I love that it's just so effective in so many different ways. Yeah, so that's my number five.
100%. That's a great choice because that's honestly like one of the funniest Disney movies out there, I think. Like,
It is, and I feel like every joke lands every time.
yeah,
It's so good.
it's so good. And like even as an adult now knowing like already being familiar with David Spade's stand-up comedy and then going back and watching that, I'm like, what is going on, man? This is
Yeah.
great. This is great. My number five is from a movie that's like pretty funny, but also very disturbing. But I love the elegance of the design. I think it's a lot better than the kind of ruggedness of the Dream Machine in Inception. But I love the way the Dream Machine looks in Paprika, which we watched together a while back. I think we were still in college when I showed that to you.
I think we were
Um,
in high school. I think that was over 10 years ago.
yeah,
A long time ago now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it basically looks like a headband with these little glowing tendrils. But then when things start to escalate, when shit goes down, like the tendrils start like digging into people's like forehead skin, and it's like really, really disturbing and gross. But I just yeah, I just like the way it looks. It looks very sci-fi, but it looks like it can exist today. Even though it came out in like 2006, even though the movie came out in 2006. So yeah, I got to go Paprika. I got to reference Paprika because I always do on this show.
Do you really? I was actually just thinking about rewatching it. It's I feel like I watched that movie when I was not too young, but I want it to like stick more with me.
For sure.
Um, Especially like even just thinking of the Dream Machine, like talk about a visual that was very ahead of I guess ahead of its time. Like when you think of how like Black Mirror and like subsequent sort of futuristic technology type of movies and TV that have come out since then.
Yeah,
Like there aren't many that are as effective in their design as a lot of the stuff that's in Paprika.
definitely, definitely. What do you got for number four?
Number four, of course, I had to include a Studio Ghibli thing. I feel like I couldn't quite escape. Number four is going to be the ramen from Ponyo.
A
I I like the food from Studio Ghibli was it was hard not to put multiple food items on this list because
right.
they all look so delicious and I just love the way that food is portrayed in Miyazaki's films. But the ramen from Panyu in particular is just it just looks so delicious and like hearty and like it comes at a point in the movie when like you've just met one of the main characters and like it's raining outside and it's cold and then they get served this like beautiful homemade yet like very simple bowl of ramen with that like very thick cut ham and they both
Amazing.
just like devour it and I just love that scene so much and I want my ramen someday to look as delectable as the ramen in that movie though I don't know if that's possible.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, the only ramen that I think can compete is the ramen experts ramen in Food Wars. The
Yes, that's very yeah, that's very close.
yeah. My number four is where I broke the rules a little bit because I had I felt bad not including the Broom Army in Fantasia. They're just so freaking cool and they're so organized. They're so perfect. They're so precise. Uh, yeah, my goals as someone who cleans his own stuff is to be as perfect and as precise as the Broom Army. I also just appreciate the idea that like the thing's called Fantasia. It's one of the most like opulent movie scores in history, and it's got all this like crazy like this crazy amount of money was put into the production of it, and it's just like the story is a wizard being lazy, like a wizard's assistant being lazy. Like it's it's perfect. It's so relatable and so fun and really really cool.
Yeah, that's definitely one that came to mind first when I was thinking of this list because they're so iconic and the fact that there's no speaking in Fantasia at all, I feel like makes it even more so because there's like less to focus on.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I love that it's such like a sort of bombastic, opulent story, but like the kernel of it is just so simple.
amazing.
Yeah.
What
All
do you got
right,
for number three?
so for my number three, I've got a Pixar pick,
Ooh,
and it's going to be in Ratatouille, right at the beginning, when all the rats are escaping onto their like little gross little boats in like that sewer water, and Remy has to get on his own little boat and he's trying to catch up, and he pulls out that spatula has like the giant hole in the middle
All
and
right.
tries to use it as a little oar. That part always makes me laugh so much, even though it's like clearly not really meant to be a visual gag. Like it's in such a serious and like tense moment, and like, you know, the music is like so fast and anxiety inducing, and like you're unsure of what's about to happen, but then he's trying to paddle with this oar that is clearly like completely ineffective and doing absolutely nothing.
Hell yeah.
And I love that part of the movie so much, and especially like it provides such a great contrast to like the precision and cleanliness of like all the other kitchen items that we see later on in the movie. That one, it just sticks out in my mind. Like I wish that they would sell merch of that like rusty, dingy spatula, because I would buy it. Um, yeah, it's just one of those. It was the first thing I thought of when making this list. Is just like came to mind.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Um, yeah, I definitely need to rewatch Ratatouille because I've only seen it the one time and I didn't even remember that scene until you mentioned it. That's so good. Damn. Um, my number three is from a TV show. It's not from a movie. But I had to pick Harley Quinn's hammer for my number three. I love this thing as a weapon. I love that it gets used like in an R-rated capacity in the TV show. I like that the show is super gory and sometimes like very like because that I don't know, it just adds an extra punch, an extra little bit of spice to the laughs that the show provides. And I think the show, even though it's very different from what happens to Harley in the comics or in the previous TV shows or in the movies, it's very different from all of those things. But they nail the fundamentals of the character so well, including the way she fights. And so I love the inclusion of the hammer and her giving up the hammer to for the baseball bat too. Like it's just great. It's great.
That's a good one. Though I feel like now you're breaking all of the rules of the criteria of the list, where it's not just inanimate objects, and now it's not just from movies.
I'm sorry.
You're totally fine. No, that's a really good one though. I almost forgot that she has the hammer at the beginning of the show, because I feel like she's so often fighting with the baseball bat that just like kind of comes out of nowhere in a lot of the fight scenes. But yeah, when she's in the like more traditional Harlequin outfit, she does have the hammer.
Hmm. Um, cool. Number two.
All right. Number two is going to be the sake from Your Name, the
Very
one that
nice.
she makes, and it has to like chew and spit into the jar in the ceremony. Um, I love this object because you see it in several points during the film, so it's not just like a runoff and then you never see it again. But I love that she's so embarrassed by it, because during the ceremony, like her classmates are in the crowd and they're like, kind of snickering at her, and like you can tell that she's really wants to uphold like this tradition, but like, she's chewing something up and spitting it back out in front of like her whole town. And she feels self-conscious about it. But then right later on in the film, drinking the sake is what takes him, back in time to her time. And so it just I don't know, it's the only object on this list that I could think of that like changes over time, and we see it multiple times in the movie. Yeah, and it's just something that every time I think of that movie, it's in the forefront of my mind. Also because I don't think I've ever seen that in any other in any other movie, so it definitely stands out to me.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I'm especially happy to hear that because my number two is also an inanimate object from your name, but it's a different one. It's the ribbon that she puts in her hair that he
Oh
gets.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Dude, I like as soon as I start the movie, I cry when I see the ribbon, dude. It's the movie has such a stupid stranglehold on me. Like it's I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. It's part of it is the emotions I associate with it. Part of it is just that the movie slaps in every uh on the entire spectrum of emotion that I can feel. Um and yeah, it's a good symbol of their bond together of the it also recalls the themes of fate, which is also something that the is tied to, and destiny and how everything's intertwined. And yeah, it's just a beautiful thing. We see it. It's the thing that gives her character away too when she has the cameo in Weathering with You, because you just see the back of her head at first. It's like, oh, I know the ribbon. And yeah, so I got to go with that one.
Oh, that's such a good pick. I have to watch that movie again because it similarly has just like a hold on me. I watched it for the first time with you, and it was your pick when we watched it. And I remember seeing you like really trying not to get emotional in the first like half of the movie as to not give anything away. And then the second half of the movie just absolutely decimated me on
Right,
every emotion known to man. And then I was like, okay, I understand what I saw on Jared's face in the first half of the movie.
right, right. 100%, 100%. Alrighty, it's time for the number ones.
All right.
What
Number
you got?
one, my number one spot had to be something from Mulan because we're talking about animated movies and it's
Yes.
is my most watched movie in childhood. And it's gotta be The Two Weights
Hmm.
from the beginning of the movie that Mulan uses to hoist herself up that post to like prove herself to the rest of the army. It's such a good moment, and it's such a great, like, end to a training montage. And yeah, I love how they're animated too. They've got such I mean, they're weights, so, as the name would imply, but, like, especially all the Foley work of them, like, falling into the sand, I think really kinda hammers home their symbolic importance, where I feel like the sound and the visual work really well to bring the overall effect to it, and so then when she finally makes it to the top at the end of the sequence, like, it feels so earned and so well deserved, and I love that she, like, continues holding them as, like, people start cheering. It's just it's, like, giving me goosebumps just talking about it. I love that scene so much.
It's giving me goosebumps hearing you talk about it. And so it's been a while since I've seen it. So are they are they playing the reprisal of I'll make a man out of you when she's climbing it?
It's the very tail end of the song.
Oh, it's tail. Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I forget how long the song is. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so good, amazing, brilliant, best part of the movie. Um, my number one is from my personal favorite Pixar film, The Incredibles, but it's not what you might think. It's actually it's not wielded by any of the Incredibles. It's wielded by Frozone. It's the disc sled that he has that like, dude, I thought that thing was so cool. I thought that thing was the coolest thing in the planet. And then I got my own disc sled when I went sledding for the first time in like Flagstaff in the middle of like crazy ice cold January. And that was the first time I was sledding and I felt like frozen. I tried to stand on it, had my first wipeout. This thing was a part of my life, dude. It was great. So yeah, I got to go with Frozone Sled. It's not even, it doesn't even get that much screen time, but I just remember being so fixated on it and like being so like, oh man, that's the coolest thing ever. Like a CD that he's writing on, like, or like a bowl or a plate that he's writing on. I never would have thought of that in my wildest dreams. Yeah, man, I got to go with Frozone Sled.
Oh, I totally forgot that it's because, like, thinking of that scene, I always think he's just like riding on like just his feet, like Tarzan or something, but he totally is standing on one of those sleds. Oh God, this is so interesting. Like, growing up in Southern California, not really getting much interaction with snow for, that to become kind of like, a legendary object in your mind, where I'm sure for kids who, live in a very snowy place, it's like the most mundane, winter like fun objects. That's so
I
cool.
know, I know. Everybody in Denver is like, he went to Arizona. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Like, yeah. I think actually my first time in snow was in Big Bear, but yeah, that was the first time I went sledding was in Flagstaff. It's crazy, crazy. But yeah, that's our top five. Good list. Good list.
Oh, that's a good list. I feel like we had on a good variety.
Indeed, indeed. Shall we begin with Howl's Moving Castle?
Let's jump into it.
Hell yeah. I always forget to do it when other Jared isn't here, so we're not going to do the Jared reads bad reviews, poorly written reviews of movies that we're watching because it's funny, makes him laugh and stuff. Um, so I didn't do it, so I won't do it now. I won't look it up now.
You're gonna steal his bit, is what you're saying.
I'm not going to steal his bit, and I'm too lazy to do that much research. Um, but yeah, Howl's Moving Castle. So this one is one of the later Miyazaki projects. Came out in 2004, I think, and um, was but still was very very popular. Ran on the Toonami reruns. Same with all the other Studio Ghiblis, and that's I think how a lot of our generation got in touch with these movies first, watching those English dub versions. But um, yeah, I actually I watched bits and pieces of it over the years and had seen like pretty much all of it, but never all of it at once, and never all of it in order. So it was I think just a couple years ago that I finally watched it from beginning to end when they put it on HBO Max, and I watched the Japanese version. I watched the subbed version, and I wasn't crazy about it because I was very confused by the last like 10 minutes. It's just so much thrown at you at once, and then now having revisited it a couple times and like this time especially watching the dub, I like it a lot more. Like I can see why Miyazaki picks it as his favorite movie that he's done. I can see why a lot of people consider it to be their favorites. Why a lot of longtime fans of Studio Ghibli consider it to be their favorite. Um, and like I'm not as annoyed by the Witch of the Waste in this one, and by their attempt to not redeem her, but like kind of lighten the her evilness. But I feel better about it now, and I think a lot of it is because like this is one of those rare cases where the dub is better, um, and where the voice acting really like sells me on it. Like I feel like how sexy Howl is when it's Christian Bale. You know, like you just sent me a
I think
meme
that's just
about.
your thing for Christian.
Well, hold on, no, because you're the one that sent me the meme this morning that said
Because I knew we were talking about this movie.
it was a woman wearing a shirt that said "I'm a hardcore Christian," and then the back it said "Bale fan." And I was like, yes, 100%, I'm a hardcore Christian Bale fan. But also like young Sophie is played by Emily Mortimer, who's a fantastic character actress still working today. Gene Simmons, I love Guys and Dolls. Guys and Dolls is is like a really really underrated musical, and Gene Simmons plays old Sophie in this one. Lauren Bacall is was just a master seductress of the noir era in Hollywood, and so hearing her voice as an older woman playing the Witch of the Waste was
She
so
does so well, so
yeah,
well. I mean, like, it's really a moment of like she's still got it. You
exactly.
know, she's playing this old woman and she sells the character just the most. I love her in this movie.
She's brilliant. And then there's also Billy Crystal as Calcifer and Josh Hutcherson as Markle, both very funny. And so I think hearing those familiar voices really got me into the characters more, really got me more invested in the story, what was happening. And so I feel a lot better about this movie now. If you had asked me beforehand what my score was, it probably would have been in the 7 range. But now I have it at about a 9. I think this is a really, really excellent piece of fiction. I think it's a really, really excellent effort by Miyazaki himself, and um, a lot of the themes come together a little bit more, especially on the rewatch. But how did you feel about it?
Yeah. I I don't remember the first time I saw this movie. I was definitely a kid. Um, and I similarly to you, I didn't love it the first time I saw it. There was something about it that just like didn't really click with me. I don't know how old I was, but I had seen other Ghibli movies before, and so I was really excited to watch it. And then I don't know, something about it just like did not. It just wasn't a home run. I kind of forgot about it. And then I rewatched it as an adult and just like absolutely fell in love with this movie. It's so good. It just like makes my heart sing every time I watch it. It makes me laugh, it makes me cry. It's one of the most beautiful movies I think I've ever seen in terms
Yeah,
of visuals. Like, it really is just a feast for the eyes. Like, I can't stop staring at it, and, like, taking in all the sweeping landscapes and details. And I think it really Studio Ghibli does that kind of detail work, in the backgrounds, especially so well in all of their movies, at least in all of the Miyazaki ones, but I think Howl's in particular, it just looks so pretty. It
yeah.
just looks so pretty. The cityscapes, the natural landscapes, the inside of the castle, that always really sticks with me. Similarly, I would agree with you, the voice acting is incredible. I feel like it's really top notch, and I think even though it's big name screen actors, they all do so well. Like, clearly, I don't know off the top of my head who was doing the voice acting direction, but like they clearly got all the actors where they needed to be to give really fantastic performances all around. And I feel like in a lot of even just like regular voice acting movies, not even necessarily dubs, when it's big name actors, I it's often very difficult to forget that it's this big name actor voicing the person you're seeing on screen, but I always forget it's Christian Bale. Every time
Mm,
until the
yeah,
credits roll, I'm just like, "That's Howl," and then the credits roll, I'm like, "Oh my god, how could I forget that that was Christian Bale with, like, his, very iconic sort of, like, raspy or, like, almost growl at
yeah.
times." Same with Lauren Bacall and Billy Crystal, like, I forget it's them, and people don't recognize it's them. I watched this with my partner and his dad had never seen it, and I think at the end of the movie, I was like, "Yeah, I love Billy Crystal in that." And his dad, who is, like, very good with recognizing, like, songs and voices and that kinda thing, was like, "What? Where was he in this movie?" And I was like, "Calcifer, obviously," and he had no idea.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think, yeah, this movie, I'm gonna also go with 9. I think there are, um there's very little that I can critique this movie on. I think I've enjoyed it more every time I've rewatched it. I think there were parts in the plot that felt a lot like inconsistencies, or that I read as inconsistencies, or like I had difficulty kind of putting together the first few times I watched it. But this time, especially when I watched it, it all just kind of fell into place. And like every time I watch it, I feel like I get more and more out of the story. And so those little details that kind of snagged in my mind before just kind of melt away for me. So it's definitely a solid 9.
Hell yeah, hell yeah, yeah, man. It's such a beautiful, like you said, a beautiful, beautifully looking movie, and it kind of, it does fit really well into the canon of Studio Ghibli because of like the magical realism and like the way that magic and the fantastical stuff is just kind of treated very casually in the world and helps build out the world, helps flesh out the world. But what I thought was interesting about this one was like instead of being influenced by a lot of like nostalgic Japanese stuff, it's very like heavily influenced by like pre World War One Germany.
Yeah.
I yeah, I don't know what like what did you like or what did you appreciate most about the design of the because I know you mentioned the city landscapes and the natural landscapes. What do you like most about those things?
I think for me what really stands out is the colors. I
Hmm.
think especially in the city landscapes, a lot of the colors are very similar to those used in the natural landscapes, like the greens and the blues and like the pinks and reds from the flowers are very reflected in the city landscape. So even though you're getting kind of a contrast between the two kind of worlds that the castle and the characters inhabit, they don't feel dissimilar. And so, when they can see the town from the field, it doesn't feel like a cultural clash. It all feels like one world, which I really appreciate. Especially I think with like all of the kind of war themes in this movie. I feel like could be very jarring to be kind of going between what seem like very different worlds, but I think the visuals really serve to blend it all together. So it feels like a coherent world that they're inhabiting. I'm a sucker for the architectural design in this movie. It very much reminds me of Czech Republic, where I partially grew up, and so like,
Right.
I it feels very nostalgic to me in that way. I do think it's also a little easier to like fold the magic into it when it feels a little, old-timey, when it feels a little like
Right.
European plus, if that makes sense. Where like it's clearly
Yeah.
Europe inspired, but like more and bigger and more colorful and more vibrant. So then when the characters kind of casually mention magic and witches and those kinds of things, like it just it feels very cohesive, which I appreciate.
Yeah. And they do it without like any like crazy like dense exposition. There's no like in the year blah blah blah, magic entered the world, and the first wizard in the year there was the war, and then like no, it's just like it's just this is what life is like, and we gotta deal with it. We gotta live with it. You mentioned the anti-war themes, and that's kind of that was part of my main critique when I first watched the movie because I didn't really feel a cohesion between the anti-war message of the film and the core romance or the core story, which is the love story. Um, and Miyazaki himself wasn't shy about like it being a very overt response to the Iraq War. He said he wanted to convey the message that life is worth living, and I don't think that's changed. And so, yeah, I was just wondering how you were able to reconcile those two big ideas that the movie puts up front.
Yeah, I mean that's similarly to what you just said. That's definitely the part of the movie that I really struggled to understand kind of how it fit in. I think
Yeah.
especially because the ending can feel like it's not really resolving anything. Like she finds the last prince and, breaks his curse. I almost said cured him, which would not make any sense, but breaks his curse. But then Solomon just like kind of decides that we're done. And I think the first few times that I watched this movie, that was really jarring to me. I was
Right.
like, I don't know, that doesn't really make sense. But I do think that a common thing that I've seen in many of Miyazaki's movies is that like the people in power and like their reasoning behind stuff like it doesn't really matter and also doesn't really make any sense that his, at least from what I'm seeing especially in this movie, take on war is that like someone at the tippy top is just making a decision with no regard to how it's going to affect the everyday person, and so it might as well be a flippant decision of like we're going to war or like we're done now because it's not affecting them, right? Solomon sits in her palace with the king and they're just hanging out the whole movie. That's the only setting you ever see her in, even when Howl and Sophie are called to the castle, like you just see the king kind of walk through and he's like very excited and just kind of talking about it very nonchalantly. And so this time around watching it, that is much more of the sense that I got is that these people in power don't care about you. And so it could, it, it could be neither here nor there whether they start or stop something as serious and something that's going to affect the everyday person as much as a war. Or at least that's how I've interpreted it this time around. But I definitely struggled to kind of understand how the war themes fit into what is otherwise like mostly a love story.
Right. Right. I also think, yeah, I think that's good. I think you're, I think you nailed it as far as like Miyazaki's beliefs as towards like power structures and how that affects nature, how that affects society. Um, and I also think that um, I don't think anti-war movies should always have like a solid resolution, and I think that that's okay. Like I think that for me, like the obviously it's bad that the war is happening and that it's breaking the world and burning the world, but for the movie and for the story, the tragedy is that trying to stay out of the war is costing Howl his humanity and is turning Howl, and like Howl is trying to stop the war and that's making him a monster.
Yeah.
How Howl is having to kill other people just to not take a side with those people, and it's killing him on the inside and on the outside, and then that and so that's the anti-war story, is like this really magical kind of not pure-hearted, but like this free spirit has been kind of corrupted by just the presence of war, and the presence of war has also destroyed his wonderful castle. It's destroyed all these wonderful places in nature, and um, and the thing that fixes Howl specifically is love, and is Sophie's like Sophie's devotion to him. So I think I think that helped me reconcile it as far as that goes.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. I mean, right, even when Howl is not trying to kill anyone, just trying to slow down like the big airship, right? His hand gets all messed up and gross and feathery and scaly.
yeah,
Um yeah, it's definitely. yeah, right, you get kind of the, I guess, like macrocosm of like you see people fleeing the cities and you see, these vast landscapes being bombed, but you're also getting to see like how it affects Howl specifically on an individual level, as even as someone who's like trying to remain neutral in the conflict, but isn't a pacifist, right? He's not afraid to take action, just not on the part of either side. But, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter because it still is turning him into a monster.
100%. There's also a lot of anti-industrial things that a lot of anti-industrial themes in the movie. He goes probably a lot deeper in it in Princess Mononoke, and he touches on it a little bit in Spirited Away, but not too much. But here, there's he's kind of very clearly saying that, like, or portraying industrialism as a source of pettiness and as a source of arrogance, as a source of evil. Um, but what separates Howl's castle from all of that, do you think? Because Howl,
That's
the moving castle is very like industrial, it's very steampunky. It looks kind of, even though it's run by magic, it looks like a factory.
it does. It's very, I mean, on the outside, it looks very gross, right? Like it's all
Right.
rusted, and the sounds it makes are very like loud and hissing and steam and clanking. One thing I noticed on this rewatch, which is kind of one of the things I was particularly like looking to take notes on, is that at least from what we can see, all of the magical entities are either like unexplained magic or powered by fire in some way,
Okay.
right? Whereas all of the sort of all the warships, all the stuff that we see in the castle is all electrical powered or in some way like more advanced mechanically powered, right? Like the thing that takes away the Witch of the Wast's power is a light bulb. um, and you can kind of like they give you a straight up visual representation of like the clash between kind of this older fire and steam technology and like the newer technology when, right, Sophie crashes that plane into the castle and it destroys everything. And so yeah, I don't know that the magic is the most consistent in this movie, just in general. But
Right.
those are kind of the things I noticed on this rewatch is kind of this like dingier, sootier magic on one hand, and then like on the other hand, you have like the shininess and like cleanliness of like the electricity and the planes and all of that we see, which I definitely saw like many moments of contrast.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Definitely. And I actually don't mind the inconsistencies in the magic because we're watching it from Sophie's perspective. Like this whole world is being opened to us from her thing, and everything's new to her. And so I don't mind that. But speaking of which, Sophie, our protagonist, I think has a fantastic and fun journey about not just a romance with a weirdo wizard, but also uh, a journey towards loving herself more and being more liberated despite her physical despite losing like physical power. She somehow gains more independence. What did you think about the character and the writing and how you feel like, because Miyazaki really likes the female protagonist, but what did you think about Sophie specifically?
He does love the female protagonist, and my God, he does them so well, and I
Yeah,
just I love that so much. I have really grown to love Sophie. I think the fact that, and maybe we'll touch on this after we kind of talk about Chihiro and Spirited Away, but I think the closer I've gotten to Sophie's age at the beginning of the movie, she's definitely an adult, probably, in her late teens. I would venture to guess even early 20s. She's got a job. She, doesn't live at home. She's clearly has some understanding of the world. I feel like I had a hard time connecting with that as a kid,
Right.
understandably, but like now that I'm, in my mid 20s, I see Sophie and I'm just like, oh, I love her so much. I just want to give her a hug. And I love there's something that really works for me. And, even at the beginning of the movie when she's talking to her sister and her sister is like, I can't believe you just like went with that man. Like he could have, who knows what could have happened. And Sophie's immediate response is, yeah, but I'm not even pretty.
Damn.
No sense. And I love that the story's response to this is like, what if we made you even uglier? Like in the next scene, you're gonna be turned into an old, fat, wrinkly woman. Good luck. I think that's just I don't know. There's something about those two, that line being back to back with the scene where she gets turned that just I don't know, it just works so well. It's like you've
Right.
got this insecurity. Oh girl, you're about to be so tested right now. You have no idea. Um, yeah, and I love that Sophie is an older protagonist because she really knows who she is, even
Mhm.
even at the beginning of the movie, right? Her response to being cursed and like dragged into this magical world that she didn't ask for is just to be like, well, guess I have to leave. She doesn't talk to anyone. She doesn't ask anyone. She just like packs up some bread and cheese, like, this is my life now. Like leaves. And I love that so much. Like she doesn't really, sulk or really get upset about it. She just kind of keeps going and
What can you do? You know.
right? It's like, what do you do? I'm cursed now. Great. And I love that she kind of has that confidence in, maybe not her appearance, but like her ability from from the get-go and like that continues on throughout the movie, right? She just walks into Howl's house and is like, I live here now, deal with it. I'm gonna clean all this stuff. I think that's I don't know, there's something so endearing and something that is, like, very inspiring about that that attitude that she has, throughout the movie. Yeah, one thing I really kind of the other thing that I was really kind of taking notes on this rewatch is the times where she's young, the times where she's like young but has gray hair, and like the times where she's old, where I
Hmm.
feel like those are kind of her three settings, same with the difference in voice actress. Just I don't know, that was another thing that in previous views of previous times I've seen the film that like I didn't really understand. Like
Right.
why is she suddenly not old? Like, it felt very inconsistent to me, but I was wondering how you, like, make sense of those changes in her character throughout the movie.
Uh, the first time I watched it, I felt like it was like just her own self consciousness was what was like and like when that was getting eroded when she was becoming like a less self-absorbed person like the more it would but then that doesn't work either because she's already like cleaning the house as an old lady, she's already doing that stuff. So I don't know, like it's um I think when the way she's able to break Howl's curse and the way she's able to break Turnip Head's curse is with true love. And I think it's the closer that Sophie gets to loving herself, the closer she gets to breaking the curse. And um, yeah, but that doesn't. But loving yourself and being okay with who you are on the inside and the outside, it's never a linear journey. So I think it makes sense that that she keeps going back and forth over and over again. And of course, when she's asleep, like it wouldn't matter. So the curse wouldn't waste any energy. I guess. I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I made sense of it when I was watching.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think there's a right answer here. It's just something that every time I watch it, I'm like, what is happening? I think
Yeah.
is, because I think in a lot of like American movies that are sort of similar in themes in terms of like learning to love yourself and things like that. It is portrayed as a much more linear journey. And so to see her like kind of going back and forth and like at times she still has a really old voice, but like she's standing upright and has gray hair, but her face looks really young. Like there are times where they meld the two actresses' voices together as she's speaking. And so I think the first few times I saw this movie, it really threw me a little bit.
Yeah.
But this time when I watched it, um, I think the thing that I really took away from the times where she is young again is when she's really emotional. That's one thing
Mm,
I notice is that, when Howl brings her out to the meadow and she's like, you know, is like appreciating all the beauty, like all of a sudden she's standing up straight and like um has a more youthful body. And then as she starts asking him like, are you giving me this because you're leaving? And she starts crying, that's when the voice actress changes and all of a sudden she's young. And as she's like, basically begging him not to leave them because she loves him. And then as soon as the airship appears, like her voice changes back again. Um, so yeah, I think in the times where she's not trying to be just like sturdy, self-assured, confident, is the times where she's um kind of goes back to being young in some way or another. And I think that's very interesting and very powerful, like in the times where she allows herself to feel those feelings, to feel sad, to feel angry, is the times where she's like cutting through the curse at least a little bit. um and then
mm.
I think at the end, right, she is young again and everything, but she still has gray hair. So I feel like it kind of combines both like the confidence and kind of, maybe ignoring her panic about being old, but she's like fully allowing herself to feel love and like other emotion. And so she kind of gets the best of both worlds in terms of appearance.
Hell yeah, dude. That's awesome. Yeah. I wonder if that's where the trend started, where girls our age started dyeing their hair gray. Have you noticed that?
Oh, definitely. The gray hair made many impressions upon the young minds of girls when this came out.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I I mean I like it. I'm not complaining. Like I like when girls do that. It's great. But yeah, I just I didn't even think about it till now. I was like, huh, maybe that's why. Yeah, I think also like overall her character is a great counterpoint to the warmongers in the background. She she learns to love herself more through her capacity to love others and through her capacity to care for others. Um, they in the subbed version they use the word devotion, which I love that word. Her compassion, her kindness, and her generosity literally save lives. It saves Calcifer's life. It saves Howl and the Witch of the Waste who gave her the curse in the first place. And I really appreciate that Miyazaki did all of that in a way that didn't feel like he's forcing domesticity on on this person. But it's just it's this these acts of service around the house aren't keep the house clean. It's a counterpoint. It's presented as a counterpoint to other protagonists who may be more violent, who may be more vengeful. Um, uh, the protagonist in Princess Mononoke is a warrior. He's a hunter. He's a killer, and he has to not be that to finish out his journey. And so I think um, that's super key when you're fleshing out a main character in an anti-war movie, um, especially one where the character doesn't even see any battles. Um, yeah, did you have any other notes about the movie or any questions?
I guess you kind of touched on this earlier, but now having watched it a couple times, what do you make of the Witch of the Waste characters? I feel like she's so complicated, and her journey is so unexpected to what you would
Right,
think of like the person that's being set up as the villain for the first half of the movie.
right. I think it's interesting, right? Because even though she's victimized by the powers that be, I don't really feel that bad for her, because I like Sophie so much, and she caused so much damage to Sophie. But she's just really funny, so like I let it go so easily. So she's in it for me, and I know this is probably not what was intended, but the way I feel about her is like the same way I feel about Swiper. You know, like Swiper's not the true villain. Swiper's just annoying, but at least he's there and he makes me laugh, and he's and the Witch of the Waste. Um, I just thought, yeah, I don't know. I still haven't really made sense of her, like, hunger for hearts of young men. Like, I still don't really understand it. But I do find it funny that even at the very end, she's still trying to get the turnip head's heart and stuff like that. Like, I just, yeah, I'm just like, yeah, to me, she's just a fun villain. Like, not really I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite lines in the movie is when Sophie sees her and she's like, "Can you please like break my curse?" And she's like, I'm an expert at casting curses, not breaking them. Like you have to figure that out yourself." It's like the perfect answer for why the villain can't undo what damage they caused. I think it's such a great line to like some would explain like what is going on with magic in this universe, but like also, sometimes people hurt us, and unfortunately, they cannot be the ones to fix that hurt, right? Then you have to do that work yourself. It's like, and it's such a like almost a throwaway line, but I don't know. I think it so encapsulates so many things that I love about this movie and these characters, and it makes me laugh every time.
Oh man, that's awesome. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Um, yeah, and she's also like a great source for comedic relief in the whole movie, like when they're trying to race up the stairs.
Yes, and
An
she's
old
just
lady
like
versus an obese witch.
sweating. Yeah.
Like it's
And I love
ridiculous.
that Sophie, even in that moment where like, right, it's the first time she's face to face with her post curse, and she's old and in pain, and trying to help now also this dog get up the stairs she's having to carry. I love that she's like not mean to her, like she's just kind of ragging on her like, Come on, you're being so slow," and then like cheering her on at the end. I think that is such a nice touch to this like ridiculous old lady.
So good. So good. And the dog's like choking on her forearm too because she's holding it by
Yeah.
itself because she can't. Amazing. Amazing.
So
Uh,
good.
all right. Favorite scenes?
Oh, favorite scenes. I think one of my favorite scenes is when after the castle breaks and Sophia's like in that crevasse and she opens the door that's set to the mystery setting on the dial and she goes through the door and then the dog like runs in circles for a little bit and like coughs angrily and then jumps in after her. I love it. It's such a little detail that like is to the plot unnecessary that this dog is reluctant to be her companion in whatever's about to happen, but is so is so funny and also like, represents how I feel watching that scene where I'm like, "Oh no, don't go in there." Like bad things are about to happen. So good. That's definitely uh one of my favorite scenes that I always forget about and then I watch it again and it just makes me laugh.
Hell yeah.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I that's definitely up there. The staircase is definitely up there. And um when like immediately after that when Hal first meets Calcifer, like that is just so freaking cool. The firework, the shooting stars or whatever
Yeah.
spirits skipping across the water, and then the way they animate the way the star illuminates young Howl, and like you can see every individual spark is a different color. It's like, oh my god, it's so good. Um, yeah, that's definitely up there too. I gotta say,
Yeah, that's a good one.
hell yeah, hell yeah. Alrighty, folks, that's Howl's Moving Castle. Go check it out on HBO Max. And you can also check out on HBO Max Spirited Away.
All right. So Spirited Away is a 2001 Studio Ghibli movie, also directed by Hayao Miyazaki. It was very well received. I think it's actually like one of the highest grossing Japanese movies ever
Mm-hmm.
in Japan. It's wildly popular. Um, and the it was distributed by Disney here in the US. I actually the first time I watched this was a rented DVD from like a local video store, and it was like right when it was released on DVD here in the States. Yeah, the like guy at the video store was like, "You have to watch this one." And the
Oh
DVD
wow.
and also the DVD that I own because we then bought it shortly after. Before the movie starts, John Lasseter like tells you about the movie. He
Oh
goes on
really?
screen and he's like, "What you're about to watch is one of the most amazing movies." Like it's like this little scene of him talking and he like introduces Miyazaki to the camera. It's very silly. But he was the executive producer of the dubbed version,
Okay.
um, which is why there are a lot of Disney regular voices in the dubbed cast. Yeah, the first time I watched this movie was like right when it came out. I was definitely too young to watch it, and it scared me so much. It
Right.
terrified me. It was a movie that I refused to watch for many years afterwards because I just thought it was so scary. Um, and then I watched it again when I was 10, and I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my whole life. And from then on, I watched it all the time. We had it on DVD, so I watched it probably a million times. I watched it. I've tried to not watch it as many times as an adult because I don't want it to like lose its spark. I'm
Right.
really worried with favorite movies that that'll happen. Um, but it gets me every time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, just the opening few notes of the main theme on the piano, like before there's anything on screen, I am crying. Like you see that opening shot of the bouquet with the card, I am
Right.
already crying. It's so good. I have a lot of love for this movie. So, yeah. What about you? What were your first experiences watching Spirited Away?
it was mostly on TV, like with Howls, but this one I think I just watched. I think I watched up until the parents got turned into pigs, and I was so like, I yeah, that's always been like a primal, very disturbing thing to me. Like, I still get chills when I watch the original Pinocchio, when what's his name gets turned into a donkey, and this time it's still gross to me, and still like disturbing and frightening, more so than the no face transformation. I think there's just something. I don't know why that particular type of scare always gets me, but it does, and so like you, I didn't revisit it until much later. I think also again on Toonami, and that's when I saw it for the first time in full. And then I watched it with my family. We got it on DVD from the Cameo library, and that's when my love for the movie kind of just like, because that was the same era that we were watching classics like, like from back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and like the story quality and the visual quality of the film like stood up not just against those movies but against the movies that were coming out at the time that I was watching this film. And yeah, this is one of my favorite Studio Ghibli's. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I got sick of it as a young adult, and it took a while before I revisited it again and was like, yeah, what the fuck am I? What's my attitude? Shut up, Jared. Don't have such a big attitude about this. This is dumb. Like, just like the movie. And so I love the movie a lot. It's one of my favorite Ghibli's for sure.
I think this was definitely the first Ghibli movie I ever saw, and I think the first Japanese movie I ever saw.
Oh
Yeah,
wow,
yeah,
maybe me
um,
too. I don't know.
yeah. Even like anime or anything. This was my first introduction
That's crazy. I didn't
to
even think about that.
yeah, yeah.
Huh.
Because I didn't really have access to any like anime or manga or anything until I was probably like 13 or 14. Um, and I didn't really know anyone besides like my brother who was into that kind of media, and so it just never crossed my my mind except for Spirited Away.
Yeah. It might have been this at the same time as Dragon Ball Z for me.
I feel I never count Dragon Ball Z because it was just on regular TV all the time. I always
Right, right.
forget that it's an anime.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, no, to
um,
me, like Ninja Turtles and Dragon Ball Z inhabit like the same brain space, so I never think of it. Dragon Ball Z, okay, besides Dragon Ball Z, it was my first encounter with anime.
for sure, for sure. What would you rate one of your favorite movies of all time?
It's a 10.
It's
It's
a
a
10.
perfect
Yeah.
10 for me. I really and truly, even as an adult, even after like having taken a break from this movie for many years, like I did not watch it throughout high school or college, and I didn't revisit it until a couple years ago. Even then, I really cannot find fault in this movie, and I'm sure a big part of that is like nostalgia and the fact that this movie made such a huge impact on me as a kid. But I just love everything about it. Even now when like I know exactly what scene is coming up and like it just it's great and I notice new things in the background and little hints every time I watch it and it's just yeah, it's a this is what a perfect 10 movie looks like to me.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. Even Roger Ebert gave it a perfect score when it first came out too.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he's like next to Pauline Kael, probably my favorite uh, film critic ever. And yeah, I would also give it a 10. I can't really I can't really think of anything that I can fault the movie. Maybe more screen time between Haku and Chihiro, but that's just a wishful thinking as someone who loves all
Yeah,
the
right.
screen
You
time
just want
between.
more of the movie.
So I can't count that as a fault against the movie. Yes, and like and it's so dense and it's so packed, but like still so like lovely and such a fun journey that I don't mind how many things are. Like every time, like I always forget about the baby. I forget about the giant baby every time. I forget about the radish spirit in the elevator, which is so adorable, and he's so big. And he just looks at the way he side eyes her, like you gonna pull the lever, like the like like both the bird and the mouse knitting. It's just such a beautiful image. Most of what I remember, of course, is the Haku stuff and the no face stuff, but um, yeah, it's very very good, very very awesome movie. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
The baby is actually what I found most scary about this movie when I was a kid.
Oh really?
There is,
Yes.
I mean, the parents turning into pigs, obviously, like the whole first 15 minutes of the movie are terrifying, but
Yeah.
the part where you see like the boiler and then Kamachi with like all his crazy looking arms, that struck fear into my heart
Oh
as a
man.
child. But the part that like every time I think about how scared this movie made me is that part where Chihira's in like all the cushions with the baby and the baby's holding her arm and like threatening to break her arm. Oh my God, something about that. Even now, even watching it for this, it just makes me sick. There's something about it that is so scary. Um, yeah, I don't know if it's like the juxtaposition of like the opulence and like, what is supposed to be like a cushiony, comfy room that's inhabited by this giant evil baby. But yeah, there's something about that scene that scares me so much, even to this day.
Yeah, they definitely keep you on your toes the whole time, and that's one of the best things about it is like there's just endless variations on everything, from Kamaji to the baby to the stink spirit to the people that work in the bathhouse, and so like weird and wacky creatures and magical realism. Like that's something that's common in anime films. It's common in Miyazaki's canon. But what sets specifically this film's world and the creatures in it apart to you?
Um, to me is that like no one is as they seem on the surface in a
Mm,
way that I think really pulls me in to the world. That I don't think even like other anime that has like some of the similar aspects of magical realism or like creatures and that kind of thing don't get me as much. Like Kamaji being a perfect example where like he is scary looking. Like you show
yeah,
that image to a child, it's a weird Spider-Man and his arms are all lumpy. You can't see his eyes. Like he's old, he's kind of rude at the beginning, the way that he moves I think really is very striking and very distinct. But he's just like this he's friendly, he helps Chihiro out for no reason.
yeah.
Just because he's kind. He's just like, "Yeah, that's my granddaughter. Make sure she gets a job. Bye." Even after he's seen her be like completely useless and like disrupt his whole production line, like and like really annoy him, he still sticks his neck out for her just because he's a kind person. And that's so many of the characters in this movie are like that. Like even Lynn, even though she's not scary, like she does not want to help this little girl. She's like,
No.
you're just like a puny, weak little person that like now I'm in charge of because Kamaji told me so. But then at the first opportunity, she sticks her neck out for her, right? The foreman comes around and is like, "What have you got there? You smell weird." And she pushes her into the elevator so she doesn't get caught. Like just because. And I
Yeah.
love that so much. I feel like all the characters that are, kind of supposedly evil, except maybe Yubaba, like it's not even that they get redemption, right? Like No Face doesn't do anything to redeem the fact that you know, he has caused property damage and, also ate a bunch of people. He just he just is forgiven because he was acting crazy because he was in an environment that wasn't good for him. And like, you know, it's they become multifaceted characters and like in a way that feels so natural and in a way that makes me want to know more. Similar to you, is like my only critique of this movie is I want more of it. I want more scenes with all the characters and more interaction. Because like I think the layers of every character you get time with, it just draws me in a way that I think is really difficult to do in a movie that has so much action and so
Yeah,
much, plot happening and things are constantly happening. Um, like to get characters like that you want to know more about, that are so interesting and whose motivations aren't always necessarily clear, but they definitely get you to lean in and pay attention. I think that's really difficult to do.
hell yeah, hell yeah. Um, I think that also helps out, like, helps flesh out Chihiro's journey too, because she's going from someone who is a brat, is, like you said, very useless. And I think all these characters kind of lead her by example to becoming a much more active protagonist. And she rediscovers herself by specifically by helping others and by helping the world and by learning the value of like good hard work. Like she's, totally complaining about like the idea of just having a job, but by the end of it, she's the one leading the cleaning of the stick spirit and taking the initiative when No Face starts going nuts. um and so yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it, especially with all those side characters. No Face being the most famous, probably. Did you have any other notes about this, about the character and about how you see them and how they fit in?
No Face is such an intriguing character, and I definitely understand why he's often like what people take away from this movie. He's never been necessarily my favorite or most interesting character.
Hmm.
Um, but this time around, I'm always, or I guess every time I watch this movie, I'm always struck by what Chihiro says as they're leaving the bathhouse when, Lynn is like, he's following us now. Great. Why are you doing that? And she's like, I don't think he's gonna hurt us. I just think being in the bathhouse makes him sick. It just like, I don't know, there's so much wisdom in that line of like it's No Faces no one. We don't know anything about him. All we know is that like there is an environment that makes him act wrong, right?
Hmm.
And I think that in this rewatch especially, I think like No Face is really just like a reflection of what's happening in the bathhouse, right? The
Yeah,
people in the bathhouse are greedy. And so he indulges into that, right? He's offering Chihiro the bath tokens and then of course with the gold later on, and like the more people feed into it, like the more, the he just keeps getting fatter. The more like that sort of sickness in him grows. And as soon as he's out of that environment and with Chihiro who like, you know, refuses all of his offers except for that first math token, like he's suddenly just like this awkward dude. He doesn't know where to sit on the train and like he doesn't know what's happening. And then, as soon as they get to Zeniba's, he's knitting and like, can do all these skills. And like I think it's just, shows that like when you're put in the right environment, like that's going to be a reflection of your actions. And I think it's very powerful also to say that like sometimes people act crazy because they're under a lot of stress and you just have to forgive them for that. And it just is what it is. And I think that that's such a cool and I think um unusual message, especially in a kids movie where Chihiro like does not second guess his intentions of following her at any point. She's just like, "Oh, you want the fourth ticket? Great. Just make sure you sit down and behave yourself on this train ride." Like, no, she doesn't demand an apology. She's not resentful or angry at him. She's just, great, you're part of the crew now, on to the next place. And I think that's just, yeah, I think that's just so, so cool and so heartwarming.
I agree. And also, like, none of it, like, it started from a good place, too, because when he offers her the bath token, he's responding to her hospitality of letting him inside the bathhouse in the first place. Like, it's not, it's like you said, it's like it's total reflection. Um, the other, I think, interesting side characters of note that you mentioned briefly were Yubaba and Haku. Uh, Thoughts on them, notes on them, and their journeys and the way they interact with Chihiro.
I feel like I don't know what to make of Yubaba completely
Yeah.
because she's not as layered as the other characters. It seems like she really is just the greedy, capitalist. That's her role, and
Right.
she's gonna choose the business every time. And she's very much portrayed as the antagonist of the movie. They do I appreciate that she's got this great balance of like being tricky but being fair.
Mhm.
She's like, I get to give her one last task, and she does stick to that, but the catch is that she doesn't actually put the parents in the, pig lineup to be chosen. And I think that is, I don't know, just interesting. Like she's not fully evil, but she's not I mean, she's definitely not good, but she does stick by her word. She took this oath that she'd give anyone looking for a job, and even though she doesn't want to, like she does stick to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I do like that they gave her a child to like something to actually care about. I think that made her a little more interesting, especially near the end when she stops being scary. And but yeah, I agree. What about Haku? I know you
Oh,
loved it.
Haku. Oh, one of my favorite characters of all time. Yeah, the part where you first meet him and he like goes like this and like blows and the scales come up. That awakened something in me as a child that I did not understand. And it just like lived in my mind. I could not stop thinking about it and rewatching that scene.
Right,
It's like
right,
so elegant and like the epitome of cool, but like you don't know what's happening. It's like very
right.
confusing. I think Haku is such a good character that I similarly with Howl like has enough intrigue to keep you guessing like what his intentions are. Um but I think unlike Howl, like he's very squarely good and kind and like is not, he's not vain, he's not greedy. He's just trying to find his way home, and you know, you understand that like at work he has to be stern because he's the boss in some ways, but he helps Chihiro from the very get-go. Um yeah, I think he's such a great character. Fantastic character design too. Like the way that his face can look like so steely in moments where he's sort of in I guess like work mode versus
Hmm.
like when he's being very soft and kind and gentle with Chihiro is just I think just so good. Just so good.
Yeah. There's that scene when like right after they visit the pig pens, he's like I remember your real name for some reason. I can't remember why. And I'm like, oh, that's so
Yeah, and he
adorable.
smiles at her and you're just like, I don't know what's going on with this amazing.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, and I think with Haku, like something that you're touching on with all these characters is that like all these spirits that are a part of our real world and take and are affected by the changes in our real world, or I guess material world. A lot of them, or all of them, aren't really bad, but the systems in place, the economics of the bathhouse, the pollution in the rivers, the growth of civilization. I'm making air quotes for the listeners. Um, all of these things are what's really at the heart of these spirits' problems. The reason Haku can't remember his past is because of housing development. And the reason why the stink spirit got stinky was because people literally forgot that it was a river. They literally forgot that it was a river because of all the junk in it. And and like everybody's mean and grumpy and grouchy because of the weird payment system and the money system inside the bathhouse. And so, yeah, I think Miyazaki has never been shy about his open critiques of how American and West and European culture has affected Japanese culture that he was very nostalgic for. And so, yeah, I think that's a really beautiful thing about this movie, that he can make a fantastic kids movie about a coming of age, a girl's coming of age, and a girl's journey towards rediscovering herself, and also like put in his own stuff in a way that's even more eloquent than Naushka of the Valley of the Wind, in a way that's even more eloquent than Princess Mononoke, because those movies are very like overt, and there's nothing wrong with that, but uh, you know, he says the same stuff in a much more efficient way and a much more simple way and spirited way.
Yeah, and the visuals make it so effective, especially with the river spirit. Like,
Yeah.
that image of the garbage heap, like, crashing out of the river spirit is something that really sticks with you as a kid. It's
Hmm.
like so visceral, like you can almost smell how gross it is, and you see like all the washing machine and the slide and the toilet and like all the stuff in there. I think it really is an effective way to show um what happens when we don't take care of nature in a way that just like drives the point home so well. um yeah, yeah, it's really really good. I really appreciate that in a coming of age story, like he's managed to intersperse these themes in there as well, where it's not right, the story is not overarchingly about environmentalism, but the message still gets across really well.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of coming of age story, our main girl, Chihiro, what what stuck out to you? Like, what stuck out about her at first, and what do you think like keeps you coming back to her story and her journey specifically, uh, even for as many times as you've seen it?
I mean, I think it's definitely a self-insert type of thing. I feel like I
Right.
was a very whiny child, and I think there were many adults in my life who expressed that sentiment to me. So to see a kid on screen that like is not overtly, malicious, she's not mischievous, she's not, trying to be lazy or needy. She's just being a kid like to see that on screen and like especially her body language, like at the beginning of the movie, she's standing and like her shoulders are up to her ears and she's like holding the bottom of her t-shirt. Like there's something that felt so me about that as a kid watching it, and that like now I see and I'm like, she's literally just being a little kid. Like that's just how kids are. They're scared. The world is completely new to them. They're
Yeah.
relying on their parents for guidance and understanding. But even so, right, Chihiro makes the right choice when her parents don't,
Yeah.
right? I think that's very interesting, even though, unlike in Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away, like the magic is not known, right? It's
Hmm.
hidden. The mom says, right, some people think spirits live there when Chihiro asks about the little stone houses. But even so, Chihiro just innately understands how the magical world works and like respects it, even when she does not know what's going on, right? She won't eat the food. She listens to Haku right away when he's like, girl, you need to get out of here. But then, when she hits the water, she realizes that she cannot, she's got to get out of there. Like there's something very interesting about, her parents don't understand how to respect the magical or the natural world, but Chihiro does, and she does, at every turn, which I think is really great. And I think one thing I also like really connected with her about, and something that does keep me coming back, is like she's not intentionally lazy. It's just not because
Hmm.
she wants to not know how to do things. Like as soon as a task is put in front of her, she does it. Right? She wants to know how to mop the floor, and she tries her darndest. She's real bad at it. And so then, yeah, like in her various sort of trials, like even though she's scared or even though she doesn't really know what's going on or how to do something, like she kind of does it anyway, even if it's not perfect. And I think that's so great to see, right? Like the scene that where she's like going down all those stairs right at the beginning, like basically like her first trial of like you got to get to the boiler room. Like she's terrified, she falls, she's screaming, but she gets there in the
Yeah.
end. And I love that it's not like this like triumphant pass of succeeding. Like she just stumbles her way through it, but it's done.
She hits the wall face first too.
Yep, she
Like.
hits the whole face first. And then that frog immediately is like smoking out the window. Just so good.
So good. And I know you mentioned an interesting comparison between Chihiro and Sophie. What'd you find?
I just, I, it's, to me, it's very much like Miyazaki writing a coming of age story for a kid versus for an adult,
Hmm.
right? Like, there's so many, wrote down so many similarities between Chihiro and Sophie's like plots or like things that happen to them or characters that are very similar in both stories, and they handle everything so differently, right? They're both like thrust into these new magical worlds, and Sophie's first instinct is like, okay, this is my life now, I gotta go. Whereas Chihiro, is running around, she's trying to find her parents, she's panicked the whole time, like, and to me, it's not so much that they're completely dissimilar characters. It's just that they're different ages, right? It's the difference between someone who's 10 getting thrust into a completely new situation versus someone who's, 20. And I
Right.
think that's so interesting, and I think that's part of the reason why like I connected with Spirited Away so young versus like Howl's Moving Castle. It's really taken me until I've been an adult to really like fully appreciate it, is because I'm like, now I get it. I'm like, yes, if I was turned into an old woman, I also would be like, well, I have to go to work.
Time to leave and get a new job. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, man, and yeah, it's really really cool, man. And it was I watched them back to back in the same day, and I hadn't done that before with these two movies. It's always been like, it had been years since I had seen Howls before I rewatched Spirited Away, and it's been years before I watched Spirit. So it's very interesting to see the two of them, and even though it's like the same era of Miyazaki, two very very different approaches to growth and to womanhood and to exploring the East West conflict, spiritual conflict. Um, and yeah, it's very very interesting, very very cool. Any other notes you have about Spirited Away?
I mean, I could talk about this movie literally all day.
For sure.
I guess the other sort of um, comparison between the two movies that kind of touches on the way that it handles some of the East-West themes, but that I notice is that Spirit Away is so much more like dirty looking
Oh
in
yeah,
its design, and I don't think I ever really um I didn't really realize that until, watching them back to back. Like the colors are a little bit more muted. You know, she spends her time in these like very industrial looking, gross, dirty
right.
places. And it's kind of like sort of the two main settings of like the bathhouse and the castle are sort of inverses where like the bathhouse on its face looks very decadent and opulent, and it's not until right she's like climbing around the side where you realize that like that is just the front facade, right? The
Right.
rest of it is this like industrial, like these rusted tin roofs and like concrete, whereas like the castle is that almost the exact opposite where like the outside is like this industrial gross looking thing, but the inside is like this welcoming, warm, cozy environment. And I just watching them back to back, that really stood out to me. But I was interested in hearing um, more of your thoughts on like the way that it handles the East and West kind of cultural themes.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the biggest thing for me for Spirited Away specifically. Like, like just as a concept, the bathhouse is so luxurious. Like you're paying hundreds of people, dozens of people to give you a bath. Like that's insane. And like whatever, money is money and service is service. But when you really get down to, but like I love that the world shows us like what happens when you really get down to the nitty gritty of what it takes to run one of these things, and puts a kid in the middle of it. And then also the kid is trying to deal with saving her parents, finding out the nuances of all these new spirits and all this stuff. It's very overwhelming and very, very cool. And I also felt that kind of east-west tension in yeah. I think you mentioned it when you were talking about Yubaba, like the the capitalist mentality of her. Like everything is everything, including like except maybe the kidnapping of her baby. Everything is something that's entirely about increasing profit and making sure that the business is okay, making sure that that all of that is secure, that her money is all safe. As soon as she hears a noise outside, she's like hiding jewels. She does that twice. And then and then the movie also juxtaposes her with Zeniba, and Zeniba's very, she's equally as powerful as her sister, and yet she has half as much stuff, less than half as much stuff. And she understands the importance of, she doesn't need to knit, or she doesn't need knitting, but she does it anyway. She has magic. She can make whatever cloth she wants out of thin air, but she chooses not to. Um, and yeah, I think that's just a key part of Miyazaki's work ethic. You know, a lot of the stuff. I don't know if that's intentionally meta-cinematic, but a lot of his, approach to filmmaking is like, I'm going to do it myself. A lot of the great Asian filmmakers did this. Kurosawa himself would edit the Seven Samurai literally after they stopped shooting that day, and that inspired all the other actors to work even harder. And so I don't think the movie's like saying like you need to do everything yourself and you need to work hard and you need to do all this stuff. But I think the movie is, very clearly like trying to show us a difference between uh, the American approach to hard work and the Eastern approach to hard work. And then also with Howl's Moving Castle, I think it's not necessarily there in terms of like uh, the labor stuff, um, but in terms of the political and the uh, yeah, in terms of the political stuff and just showing the pettiness of all these world leaders, like it's a very uh, you know it's a very clear um, venting of frustration at the Bush administration and at NATO as a whole. I think, um, and so I think you know um, yeah, I think Miyazaki is he's trying to find a balance between like no, sorry, he's not trying to find a balance. He's just trying to reconcile the Japan of his childhood with the Japan that he sees today, and he does that in two different ways here, and I think both ways are beautiful.
Definitely. And he's definitely like um a big fan of kind of living the simple life, right?
Hmm.
Just having your own little house and hanging laundry out to dry, and you know, Zeniba is happier in just like her little cottage by the fire, and Sophie and the gang are all happiest when they're just out in the wastes in their like cozy house, and I think that's very sweet. And
Hmm.
I think a definite through line through most of his movies of like people really thriving when they're just with the people that they love, with very simple means of living. Yeah, and I just think that's great, and it always, I don't know, always makes me tear up watching those parts of these movies. These two as well as other Miyazaki movies. Yeah,
Hell yeah, hell yeah, dude.
yeah.
Well, those were our reviews of two modern classics in animation. One being, I didn't even realize this until we googled, but um, like Spirited Away, I think is still the only hand drawn film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, which
Oh, I
is
did not know that.
yeah, that's insane. Because I think they only started it in 1995 with Toy Story. Um, and yeah, there have been since other nominees, but I'm pretty sure that's the only one. Um,
Dang.
it, yeah. But yeah, anyway, you can check out both on HBO Max. You can. Uh, is there a link you can send the people to buy your pottery stuff? I know you've been selling it at various
I
things.
don't. I only sell in person.
Okay, no worries, no
So,
worries. Well, if
yeah.
you're in Chicago,
If you're in Chicago, there's some craft fairs coming up that I'll be vending at. I make pottery and sell it from time to time.
hell yeah, hell yeah. Alrighty. Anything else you want to leave the people with, Pauline?
Go watch these movies if you haven't, if ever, or if you haven't in a long time. They're both amazing, and if you need a good cry, I think either will really get the job done.
Hell yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. All right, everybody. We love you. Goodbye.
Let's go.
What a lovely day!
Andy, there's a whole world out there. Jump in.
Can you dig it?
Yeah.
You must always pay strict attention.
I was just completely enamored by it the entire time.
Dude, he did not have to go that hard.
I know, man. Isn't it wild?
The Jared cast.
So it